I want to share with you how Umar became a Muslim. Now, Umar was the second of the righteously guided caliphs, and he was a very senior companion and friend of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. And how he became a Muslim is a fascinating story in itself. And I'm going to continue reading from this book, Muhammad, His Life Based on the Earliest Sources, by Martin Lings. And we're up to chapter 28, simply entitled Umar. When the two envoys returned to Mecca with the news that they had been rebuffed and that the Muslims had been established in the favour of the Negus, Quraysh were indignant and dismayed. They immediately set about intensifying their repression and persecution of the believers, largely under the direction of Abu Jahl, whose nephew Umar was one of the most violent and unrestrained in carrying out his instructions. Umar was at this time about 26 years old, a headstrong young man, not easily deterred and of great resolution. But unlike his uncle, he was pious, and here in fact lay his chief motive for opposing the new religion. Khattab had brought him up to venerate the Kaaba and to respect everything that had come to be inseparably connected with it in the way of gods and goddesses. It was all woven together for him into a sacred unity that was not to be questioned and still less to be tampered with. Quraysh also had been one, but Mecca was now a city of two religions and two communities. He saw clearly, moreover, that the trouble had one cause only. Remove the man who was that cause, and everything would soon be as it had been before. There was no other remedy, but that would be a certain remedy. He continued to brood along these lines, and eventually the day came, it was soon after the return of the unsuccessful envoys from Abyssinia, when a sudden wave of anger goaded him into action, and taking up his sword, he set out from his house. No sooner had he left it than he came face to face with Nu'aym ibn Abdullah, one of his fellow clansmen. Nu'aym had entered Islam, but he had kept this a secret in fear of Umar and others of his people. The grim expression which he now saw on Umar's face prompted him to ask him where he was going. "I am going to Muhammad, that renegade, who has split Quraysh into two," said Umar, "and I shall kill him." Nu'aym tried to stop him by pointing out that he himself would certainly be killed. But when he saw that Umar was deaf to such an argument, he thought of another way by which he might at least delay him in time to give the alarm. This would mean betraying a secret of fellow Muslims who, like himself, were concealing their Islam. But he knew that they would forgive him and even applaud him in the circumstances. "O Umar," he said, "why not first go back to the people of thine own house and set them to rights?" "What people of my house?" said Umar. "Thy brother-in-law Sa'id and thy sister Fatima," said Nu'aym. "They are both followers of Muhammad in his religion. On thy head may it fall if thou let them be." Without a word, Umar turned and made straight for his sister's house. Now, there was a poor confederate of Zura named Kabab, who often came to recite the Quran to Sa'id and Fatima, and he was with them at that moment with some written pages of the surah named Taha, which had just been revealed and which they were reading together. When they heard the voice of Umar angrily calling out his sister's name as he approached, Kabab hid in a corner of the house, and Fatima took the manuscript and put it under her gown. But Umar had heard the sound of their reading, and when he came in, he said to them, "What was that gibbering I heard?" They tried to assure him he had heard nothing. "Hear it I did," he said, "and I am told that ye both have become followers of Muhammad." Then he set upon his brother-in-law Sa'id and grappled with him. And when Fatima went to the defence of her husband, Umar struck her a blow which broke the skin. "It is even so," they said. "We are Muslims, and we believe in God and in his messenger, so do what thou wilt." Fatima's wound was bleeding, and when Umar saw the blood, he was sorry for what he had done. A change came over him, and he said to his sister, "Give me that script that I even now heard you reading, that I may see what it is that Muhammad hath brought thee." Like them, Umar could read, but when he asked for the script, she said, "We fear to trust thee with it." "Fear not," he said, and unbuckling his sword belt and laying down his sword, he swore by his gods that he would give it back when he had read it. She could see that he was softened, and she was filled with longing that he should enter Islam. "O my brother," she said, "thou art impure in thine idolatry, and only the pure may touch it." Thereupon Umar went and washed himself, and she gave him the page on which was written the opening of Taha. He began to read it, and when he had read a passage, he said, "How beautiful and how noble are these words." When Khabab heard this, he came out from his hiding place and said, "Umar, I have hope that God hath chosen thee through the prayer of his prophet, whom yesterday I heard pray, 'O God, strengthen Islam with Abu Hakam, the son of Hisham, or with Umar, the son of Khattab.'" "O Khattab, said Umar, "where will Muhammad now be, that I may go to him and enter Islam?" Khabab told him that he was at the house of Akham near the Safar gate with many of his companions. And Umar girt on his sword again and went to Safar, knocked at the door of the house and said who he was. Now they had been warned by Nuaym, so that his coming was not unexpected, but they were struck by the subdued tone of his voice. One of the companions went to the door and looked through a chink and came back in some dismay. "O messenger of God," he said, "it is indeed Umar, and he is girt with his sword." "Let him come in," said Hamza. "If he have come with good intent, we will give him a wealth of good. And if his intent be evil, we will slay him with his own sword." The Prophet agreed that he should be admitted, and, advancing to meet him, he seized him by the belt and pulled him into the middle of the room, saying, "What hath brought thee here, O son of Khattab? I cannot see thee desisting until God send down some calamity upon thee." "O messenger of God," said Umar, "I have come to thee that I may declare my faith in God and in his messenger and in what he hath brought from God." "Allahu Akbar, God is most great," said the Prophet, in such a way that every man and woman in the house knew that Umar had entered Islam, and they all rejoiced. There was no question of Umar's keeping his Islam secret. He wished to tell everyone, in particular those who were most hostile to the Prophet. In after years, he used to say, "When I entered Islam that night, I thought to myself, which of the people in Mecca is the most violent in enmity against God's messenger, that I may go to him and tell him that I have become a Muslim? My answer was Abu Jahl. So the next morning I went and knocked at his door, and Abu Jahl came out and said, "The best of welcomes to my sister's son. What hath brought thee here?" I answered, "I came to tell thee that I believe in God and in his messenger Muhammad, and I testify to the truth of that which he hath brought." "God curse thee," he said, "and may his curse be on the tidings thou hast brought." Then he slammed the door in my face. And there ends that incredibly dramatic chapter entitled Umar in Martin Ling's book. Until next time.